para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
It is 20 after 12 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. The School of Chemistry at Wits University in South Africa's local large-scale production of ionizable lipids secured a $388,000 grant to develop vaccine-enabling compounds derived from cashew nutshell liquid, a byproduct of the cashew industry that is abundant across Africa. This breakthrough positions WITS and South Africa as a leader in developing bio-renewable materials from mRNA vaccines. It also supports the African Union's target of producing 60% of the continent's vaccines locally by the year 2040. Currently, Africa produces only 1% of the vaccines it uses. And to talk to us further on this, we are joined on the line by the director of the Antiviral Gene Therapy Research Unit at Wits University, Professor Patrick Arbuthnot. Professor, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lily. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Prof, just briefly tell us about your project and who partnered with you in this project.
Just before I answer that question, just a small correction. The funding comes from the German government and the European Union, and it's 350,000 euros, not US dollars. But to answer your question, the project is a partnership between us, the Antiviral Gene Therapy Research Unit, and the School of Chemistry, and also an industry partner which is called CPT, Chemical Process Technologies, and they're based in Pretoria. And the project really is intended to take what we've done so far on a small lab scale into a big production of these so-called ionizable lipids. And their importance is because they are essential for the delivery of mRNA for it to function as a vaccine. mRNA doesn't normally get into cells to express proteins or antigens that can induce an immune response, so they need to be carried there. And these ionizable lipids are essential for that, and they work very well. And what we've done is to use this waste product, essentially, which is abundant in Africa, to make something that's quite valuable. And, it's important because it gives us freedom to operate, and it enables African countries and other LMICs to make these ionizable lipids without worrying about infringing on other people's patents.
And how is the project going to help ensure that Africa produces its own vaccines?
Well, we have to be able to produce on a large scale to vaccinate, whole countries, whole continents, in fact. And so this project is being supported to enable that process. So the production on a small scale, say from 1 to 5 grams, which is what we do at the moment, and taking that to a kilogram or ton production is really quite a complex process, and there are all sorts of considerations that go into how you can scale that up. So what this support is to enable that process, to take from the small scale, gram scale, to 100 kilograms or tons, which is required for vaccination of whole populations in countries and continents.
Prof, just the breakdown of how a vaccine is produced and the process and legislation when it comes to vaccination production. Take us through very briefly that process and how long it would generally take for the African continent to be at the level where we do not require vaccines from other countries, for instance, whether it's from the global space, but where we're able to produce enough vaccines for the continent itself?
That's a very important question and also quite a complex one to answer. But speaking from our perspective, we do a lot of research and development. We are an academic laboratory in a university, so we work on a small scale in a laboratory to identify lead compounds that might be good ionizable lipids. We test them out experimentally to determine whether or not they're toxic, whether they cause any side effects. And we found that the lead ones that we have been working on don't cause any unintended harmful effects. So the next step is then to take it to more formal toxicology assessment. So we have to produce the compounds in larger amounts under so-called GMP or good manufacturing practice conditions. So that is a standard that is required for administration of these compounds to humans. So we have to set that up, the good manufacturing practice production of these vaccine components, and then we test them for toxicology. And then the next step is to make these entire vaccines for early phase clinical trials, so they can be tested in a small number of patients, about 300 to 500 patients, just to make sure that they're not toxic in humans. And then if that all goes well, there's efficacy testing to make sure that they work in humans, and then they can be licensed to be given to people as part of an expanded program of immunization.
Now, looking at the African Union's target of producing 60% of the continent's vaccines locally by the year 2040, do you think that this is a possibility and a feasible one?
It is ambitious, but I think that Africa needs to address this urgently. It cannot rely on going north for other countries to solve its own problems. I think it's crucial that African scientists address their own health issues and develop the technology, the know-how that is required to solve those problems. And I think that is certainly the way to go. And it's important not only from a self-fulfilling point of view, but also from an economic point of view. I think importing these vaccines is costly, and I think it's also good for building a new kind of economic activity to develop vaccine manufacture and all sorts of other spin-offs that there might be from that capability. So I think it's essential. As I say, it's ambitious.
Yeah.
It's a big
well,
challenge,
Prof, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Prof. That's the director of the Antiviral Gene Therapy Research Unit at Wits University, Professor Patrick Abednotter, speaking to us on the line. It is 28 after 12 Central African Time.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is 12:30 Central African Time, and our news headlines up next with Ralani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. Making headlines, the former South African ambassador to the US, Willie Lenhlapo, says the worrying factor about the meeting between the two nations would be if the US tries to dictate which countries South Africa can engage with. President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to meet with his counterpart Donald Trump today to find ways to strengthen bilateral ties between the two nations, which have recently become strained. A federal judge has warned that US President Donald Trump's administration could be held in contempt of court for deporting a group of migrants to South Sudan. And finally, 2 days after aid began entering Gaza, the United Nations says no new supplies have reached local people. About 100 trucks have crossed into the territory since Israel eased its 11-week blockade. I will have details on these and other stories at 1 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Well, thank you to Jwalani Tulongwepe with our news headlines, and we say good afternoon to Figile Lingwati with our sports update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good afternoon, Lulu. We serve off with tennis news this hour. Novak Djokovic says he would carry on without a coach for now after parting ways with Andy Murray last week, as the Serbian prepares for his latest bid to win a record-extending 25th Grand Slam title at the French Open. The high-profile partnership with three-time Grand Slam champion Murray lasted only 6 months, but Djokovic said his respect for the Scot had only grown in that time. Djokovic is winless on clay this year after exiting the Monte Carlo Masters and Madrid Open with straight set losses last month, and his form is a concern heading into Roland Garros, which kicks off on Sunday. He had appointed fellow former world number one Murray ahead of this year's Australian Open and said in February he would continue working with him for an indefinite period. And two-time South African 200-meter champion Snesipho Dambile is gearing up for the Absa Cape Kano Classic Continental Tour in Kenya, scheduled for the 31st of May. After competing in Nairobi, Dambile will travel to Italy, where he'll be based from early June to participate in several league meetings to sharpen his form ahead of the World Athletics Championships in Tokyo later this year. A 23-year-old who has qualified for the World Championships 200-meter and as a member of the 4x100-meter relay squad, says the European circuit is key to his final preparations.
I'm not someone that likes to announce a lot of things, but I'm going to have one race in Kenya on the 31st, Cape Kano, and then after that, that's when I'm start looking at the European season. But I definitely have some races planned out there. It's a now more focusing on preparation, getting sharp, fixing things, small things like band, work, and all those things to make sure that I'm ready for the World Champs.
Dambile reclaimed the national 200-meter title in Potchefstroom, his first since winning it as a junior in 2022, and he believes this is the year he proves himself on the world stage.
Oh yeah. Like I owe it to myself, to be honest. I'm someone that wants best for me, and the one thing is good. The one thing that is good about me when I step on the bigger stage, I'm able to handle the pressure. You know, I love running with the best guys in the world. I love showcase my talent, and then that's what I've been working for. These small details and making sure that I'm sharp when it matters the most.
Now, football news as we wrap up. After years of building, recalibrating, and coming agonizingly close, Mamelodi Sundowns may finally be on the cusp of reclaiming their place at the summit of the African football. The Brazilians are on the verge of lifting their first Total Energies CAF Champions League title since 2016, and the evidence supporting their claim is more compelling than ever. The final is a two-legged affair, with the first leg set for the 24th of May at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Tshwane, and the decisive return leg taking place on the 1st of June in Cairo against Egyptian giants Pyramids FC. Having already conquered the South African domestic scene with an unprecedented 8th consecutive league titles, Sundowns have shifted all focus to bringing home the biggest prize in African club football. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Well, thank you to Fikile Ngwati with our sports update, and we say good afternoon to Nosipo Zuma with our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. In your business news this hour, headline inflation in South Africa has risen to 2.8% in April from 2.7% in March 2025. The change in CPI between March and April was 0.3%. The main positive contributors to the annual inflation rate were housing and utilities, food and non-alcoholic beverages, and tobacco, as well as restaurants and accommodation services. Notando Makudilela reports.
Inflation for food and non-alcoholic beverages rose to 4% in this period, the highest annual rate since September 2024. The rise in this category was mainly due to higher meat prices, particularly for beef products such as stewing beef, mince, and steak. The price index for oils and fats also increased between March and April, taking the annual rate to 4.8%. SATSA data also shows that on average, fuel prices declined by 3.2%.
The Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, Contralesa, has urged the Financial Minister Enoch Godongwana to also consider unemployment graduates when tabling his third budget speech. Contralesa President Kgosi Mathupha Mokoena says the unemployment rate of graduates will drive them to look for greener pastures in other countries.
Contralesa is shocked by the stats that shows the high rate of unemployment in our country, especially our youth. There are many graduates with degrees and diplomas sitting and idling at home doing nothing without jobs. This challenge will discourage our youth from pursuing their studies. Contralesa calls upon our government to come up with some strategies or mechanisms that will address this challenge, or else our graduates will leave our country to go and look for greener pastures outside South Africa.
Executive Head Business Ecosystems and Sustainability at Standard Bank in South Africa, Dr. Manessa Alagbauso, says Africa's slower development coupled with aging infrastructure are some of the major factors hindering efforts to address power cuts in many countries on the continent. Countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Zambia and Zimbabwe struggle to meet growing energy demands, leading to frequent outages and reduced reliability. Alagbauso comments come as South Africa hosts Elite Africa 2025 in Cape Town this week, which has brought together over 6,000 energy and water experts from across the continent. Alagbauso says African governments are tackling power cuts despite the limited resources.
The reality of Africa in today's day and age is without power, the continent cannot develop. The two are intricately linked. So we have this type of a developing continent for so long now that what has become really apparent is without stable, sustainable power, the continent cannot develop. So this is a top priority for all of the African countries. And I do believe that they are paying the required attention to it, of course, within the resources they have and the resources they can mobilize.
The Empower Entrepreneurs Funding Summit, Africa's leading funding platform, is scheduled to take place on the 30th of May in Johannesburg, South Africa. The event provides a unique platform for 1,500 vetted entrepreneurs to explore funding avenues. One of the event's partners, Savant Technology Incubator, says is committed to accelerating the commercialization of deep tech startups in Africa by strengthening the broader venture support ecosystem. The CEO of Savant Technology Incubator, Tabelo Ratsihule, explains.
So we assist this startup to move from ideation, prototype, up until they get to market, interact with the market, understand the problems. And the most important part is then bringing the ecosystem together, ensuring that we've got funders, we've got corporates, we've got DFIs in terms of government. Overall, we try to get the public-private partnership working instead of assisting startups in isolated, KPI-informed approach.
Now, the International Monetary Fund's first Deputy Managing Director, Gita Gopinath, says that the U.S. fiscal deficits are too large and the country needs to tackle its ever-increasing debt burden. Gopinath says that the U.S. is still impacted by very elevated trade policy uncertainty, despite positive developments such as President Donald Trump's administration rolling back tariffs on China and striking a U.S.-UK economic deal. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,600 naira 79. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 39. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 49. And in Zambia, it's 27 kwacha 05. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 65. Russia is 80 rubles 54. India is 85 rupees 51. China at 7 yuan 21. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 99. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,309 and platinum at $1,046 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $66.37 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, thank you to Nosipho Zuma with our business news. It is 12:42 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763. That's 406-9126. Hashtag Africa Update, and let us know which country you're in. And if you have any stories that you'd like us to highlight or to focus on, send us an email. It is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +2711 714 4459.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
The University of South Africa, UNISA, in partnership with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the government of Tanzania, and the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation, is hosting the 15th annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania on Saturday. The theme of the lecture will focus on the state of the continent. Preceding this event is a series of events, including the Blue Economy Roundtable that took place in Dar es Salaam yesterday. Daniel Kidjo gives us an update on what is expected.
It is indeed a great day for the cooperation between South Africa and Tanzania. Well, as you know, it's not just a collaboration. This is a meeting of the minds that goes way back. Tanzania, under leaders Julius Nyerere, was at the heart of Africa's liberation movements. Now, teaming up with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, which has been driving the African Renaissance agenda, is like reigniting that same fire for today's challenges. Now, what's really special is that only that this time around, this lecture is being held outside Tanzania, which is the first, which was first in Guinea back in 2023. So bringing it to Tanzania, that's a powerful statement of unity and shared purpose across the nation. As you know, Tanzania had hosted liberation fighters back in the days. Madiba, former late President Mandela himself had come to Morogoro, and of course Julius Nyerere really participated in the Southern African struggle. So this is truly started historically, not just today. It is a packed schedule. There's still so much to come. President Thabo Mbeki himself will be at the University of Dar es Salaam for a town hall with students and academics. That will be a connection of two generations, the youth as well as elderly generations, working together to shape Africa's future. On Thursday, the delegation will head to Morogoro for a symbolic tree planting ceremony. It's not just about the environment, of course, because they'll be planting trees, but it's a nod to Tanzania and Southern Africa's history in sort of helping Africa's liberation, where South African freedom fighters, like I said, including Madiba himself, were given refuge in Morogoro. So this is, again, a tribute to the rich history that Tanzania and South Africa has. And on Friday, things become more strategic with a high-level roundtable on South Africa's G20 presidency. Of course, we expect big discussions on how Africa can leverage off the G20 platform. And of course, Saturday is the main event, the Thabo Mbeki lecture, which goes down at the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center. Dignitaries, thinkers, and young leaders will all be there. And of course, the whole of Africa will be watching to hear the outcomes of this important day on Africa Day. The excitement is real, for sure, because from the government, South African government, Tanzanian government, and other Southern African governments, to university, to young activists. This is an election year, so young activists are going to be following up this really closely, because it's not just, it's hoped that it's not going to be just another talk shop. The themes like the blue economy and Africa's place in global politics are straight up urgent for Tanzania, for Africa, not just Tanzania. And now about maybe the keynote speakers, we don't have a name yet, but if you look at past years, we've had giants like the late President Benjamin Mkapa and the veteran diplomat Ahmed Salim, who also spoke. So you bet will be someone very serious, a serious heavyweight who has a great vision for Africa, will be delivering that speech. So there's a lot of excitement online, a lot of chatter, and obviously it's a beautiful blend between history, learning from the past, and trying to revive the spirit of African Renaissance, like President Mbeki is pushing for.
That report by Daniel Kidjo.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
The International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa says there are always ways to resolve conflicts in Africa. The ICRC says that there are 23 active conflicts in Africa, some involving tribal and ethnic differences. However, the organization is concerned that recently women and children are killed and raped in countries undergoing conflict. In a groundbreaking effort to spotlight the roots of international humanitarian law in African traditions, the ICRC Pretoria Regional Delegation launched an initiative called the Tool on African Traditions and the Preservation of Humanity in Warfare to explore the continent's historical relationship with the law of armed conflict through local practices and values. Our Channel Africa reporter, Sisi Sikhalo, spoke to Sarah Mabeza, who is the ICRC Regional Legal Advisor, to find out more about the research.
The tool on African traditions and the preservation of humanity during war is actually a living project. Our hope is that it will continue to be updated over the years, but it initially began back in 2018. Now, for those of us who know a bit about international humanitarian law, the law of war, we'll know that it is universal. Every country in the world has ratified the Geneva Conventions, which are the core of international humanitarian law. But what is also true is that at the time that they were negotiated in the 1940s, the only African countries who were in the room were Ethiopia and Egypt. And so while African states certainly believe in international humanitarian law and comply with it, there's certainly room to enhance the ownership of African states over this body of law. And that was really the start of why we began this research. So while this research looks at African traditions, beliefs and practices and values that predate the Geneva Convention, we've also, as the ICRC, been involved in work to build bridges between religion and international humanitarian law, for example. So we have projects ongoing on Islam and IHL, on Buddhism and IHL. The ICRC in the early 2000s also did a research into traditions in the Pacific Ocean islands that would correlate with modern-day principles of IHL. So this research and this tool does not exist in isolation, but really it's something that we in the Pretoria delegation are incredibly proud of.
Can you take us through your findings?
Absolutely. So what the aim was of this research was to highlight African traditions and values from across sub-Saharan Africa that would correlate to some extent with modern-day principles of IHL. So, for example, we knew that the Maasai in Kenya, for many years, the Maasai warriors would identify themselves with ivory armbands so as to distinguish themselves from civilians. And that correlates with the modern-day principle of IHL under the Geneva Convention, which says that combatants must distinguish themselves from civilians. Africans have always, to some extent, recognized the need to comply with rules during warfare. The outcome of our research is 17 practices. So each practice is a certain element or a rule or a law that has a number of traditions or customs that back it up from across the continent and that correlates with modern-day IHL. So the 17 practices really deal with a variety of issues. As I've mentioned, distinction between combatants and civilians. They talk to protection of the natural environment. They talk to protection of women and children and the elderly in times of armed conflict, as well as talking to, for example, proper burial of the dead, of the deceased soldiers during times of war. So really 17 practices that span a variety of issues related to preservation of humanity in warfare. And perhaps I can just add as well that we really tried to be as geographically representative as possible in this research. So we have customs that we have collected from Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa, all the way to Ethiopia and Kenya, and across to Senegal, Ghana, Togo, Mauritania, and Nigeria. So hopefully quite representative of sub-Saharan Africa.
Take us through some of your recommendations of the research.
Well, we have a hope as the ICRC, and the hope is that this research will really just stimulate reflection and debate on the African continent about the relevance and importance of international humanitarian law. We know how many armed conflicts this continent is facing, and our hope is that as Africans view these 17 practices as something that is owned on the continent, that it will ultimately enhance understanding of the laws of war, but also that it will enhance acceptance of the fact that there must be laws in warfare, and that this acceptance will be enhanced amongst various communities and authorities in Africa. One thing that is core to this tool and to the research and the recommendations coming out of it is the principle of humanity. The principle of humanity is one of the most important principles of international humanitarian law, and really it is our hope that as the principle of humanity is elevated, we will see change on the African continent.
That was Sarah Mabeza, the ICRC Regional Legal Advisor, speaking to Sisi Sekhalo. It is 12:53 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected at the White House later today for a much-anticipated bilateral meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Chief Diplomat Ronald Lamola, part of a quartet of ministers who briefed the president yesterday, confirmed that the delegation was upbeat and looking forward to reset what he described as a mutually beneficial relationship. The presidency also remained tight-lipped about a possible meeting with Elon Musk and potential opportunities that might be explored, while the billionaire continues to misrepresent the facts around his difficulties in getting a license to operate his internet service Starlink in South Africa. Shown Bryce Peace with this comprehensive update.
All smiles from a confident-looking South African president as he arrived to be briefed by his ministers at the embassy in Pretoria. And then an impromptu walkover to the gathered media to share his thinking ahead of his tete-a-tete with his US counterpart.
Well, we're always ready. We are hoping to have really good discussions with President Trump and his fellow government colleagues. I'm looking forward to a really good and positive meeting, and we're looking forward to a very good outcome for our country, for our people, for the jobs in our country, and good trade relations, and to normalize relations between our two countries.
The economic imperative is the most important here.
Well, the trade relations are the most important. That's what has brought us here. We want to come out of the United States with a really good trade deal, investment promotion. We invest in the United States and they invest in us, and we want to strengthen those relations, and we want to consolidate good relations between our two countries. So I'm very positive.
The agenda is likely to cover a broad range of issues: tariffs and trade in the context of AGOA, or a pivot to what might come next, peace efforts in Ukraine and Gaza, the G20 and the importance of multilateralism, and on the periphery, addressing misconceptions around South Africa's domestic laws and policies that have at times overshadowed the broader relationship. Listen to International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola.
South Africa is one of the most diverse countries in the world. In fact, it is a constitutional imperative, the issue of diversity, and the theme has been accepted and supported by all the countries members of the G20 except the US. So we also look forward to engaging on this matter even tomorrow, for the US to also participate because they are a G20 member. In fact, we are handing over to the US at the summit. So it will be good that they participate and also for us to be able to hand over.
That's South Africa's International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola ending that report by Shown Bryce Peace. It is that time of the day where we say good afternoon to the Upside team with Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
How are you, Lulu?
Well, thanks, and you? You look nice and warm.
Oh, too hot. I'm definitely going to have to
take
out some
it's
lawyers.
Hot, but outside now it's...
Yeah. Is it really? I think it's such a disappointment of a cold front.
No.
It's sunny. It's just windy, Lulu.
It's very windy and the wind is crisp. It's very nippy.
It's not a cold front. Though.
No, it's a cold front.
It's a fake. It's a
cold front. It's a cold front. So what's coming up today?
So we're going to be reflecting on News Cafe. You know the restaurant, the franchise. Mm-hmm. They are celebrating 30 years since the first restaurant was established in Hatfield and Pretoria. I remember that one because in my varsity days, it used to be like this place that everybody aspired to go. You know, the upwardly mobile people went to. And since they have had thousands of restaurants across the country, and now they're celebrating 30 years, we're going to be speaking to one of the founders of News Cafe, just reflecting on their journey. Paddle has become a really big and in sport and a way for people to unwind and relax. In Sandton, there's a rooftop where they've set up a paddle court.
Oh, really?
And it boasts obviously great views from up there. And after that, you can, have a drink, something to eat. I think there might be a little bit of music as well. You know, you really just get to relax. So we're going to be speaking to Jamila Kasim, from the paddle court and out in Sandton, and that is part of our Wind Down Wednesday. Then we'll also speak about the Transport Evolution 2025, which is really setting the stage for infrastructure development on the continent, an opportunity for us to speak about the various modes of transport that are on our roads. We're finding more and more, what do they call the micro vehicles, the scooters for the delivery services, and the tuk-tuks, yes.
Yeah, the tuk-tuks.
So many more tuk-tuks. I don't know if I'm comfortable taking a tuk-tuk. They also drive so ridiculously on the roads.
They do. And literally almost every week you'll come across
an accident.
Yeah. And it's mostly the motorbikes.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. But it's because the brands market speedy delivery. You have like under 60 minutes or whatever. So they are under pressure. But of course, lots of music, what caught your eye, all the good stuff.
And that's all coming up at the top of the hour on the upside with Nompumelelo Ngubeni and Tebogo Likuleni. For myself, Lulu Gaboo and the Africa Update team, thank you for joining us. Continue with us on our social media platforms, and thank our producers, Tracy Bumgard, our technical operator at Katu Madava, and social media, Ntsako Mashaba. It's been a good one. Let's do this again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. South African civil rights organisation AfriForum has filed a court application in the High Court in Pretoria